WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Accra. Good evening and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar and worldwide on Facebook, on YouTube and on the WADR app. This is Newslink. I am Atiewin Imbila.
And I am Veronica Njai.
Let's start with the headline stories. Ghana's President John Mahama calls for stronger health governance and increased investment as One Health Summit opens in France.
Robust surveillance systems, early warning mechanisms, and community-level interventions are our strongest defense against future pandemics.
Ministers of Alliance of Sahel states meet in Ouagadougou to adopt measures on fraud reduction.
Behind every act of fraud are schools that are not built, roads that deteriorate, and public services that are weakened.
In Benin, former opposition leaders joined campaign of ruling coalition candidate Wadr.
ECOWAS allocates more than $260 million in 5 member states for development projects. Please stay tuned for the details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
It's good to have you with us. Let's begin the bulletin in Ghana. Rather, we're looking at what Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama has been saying because he arrived in France yesterday to deliver a keynote address to a gathering of thousands of people, including world leaders. This is part of the Global One Health Summit taking place in Lyon, France. Now, leader of the host country, France, as well as those from Mongolia, Cambodia, and Botswana are all in attendance. In his speech, President Mahama warned that climate change, pandemics, and environmental degradation are fueling global health crisis.
He told the One Health Summit that there is strong need for a shift from commitments to concrete action to ensure equitable access to resources, health governance, and preparedness for disease outbreaks.
Around the world, we are facing an overwhelming surge of health threats across borders. Every species is in the crosshairs: animals, humans, and plants. And the environmental catastrophe confronting us is in the waves of the sea, it's in the glaciers, it's in the rainforests, it's in the desert storms. In my own country of Ghana, a blight of disease and pests affects smallholder cocoa farmers, threatening millions of households. Illegal gold mining leads to forest degradation and pollution of our water bodies, threatening the survival of precious populations of birds and insects critical to our biodiversity. At the foundation of all these crises is the phenomenon of climate change. And yes, we realize that everything is interconnected. From the outbreak of infectious diseases to antimicrobial resistance, and from climate-related disruptions to food systems, all these risks converge and intensify in frequency, complexity, and severity than at any time in human history. Today, however, I wish to make 3 calls to action. First, let us shift from commitment to action. The moment for coordinated effort is here. The international security agenda must fully adopt this approach as a key element of sustainable development worldwide. And thirdly, let us concentrate on building a new preventive shield and an intelligent radar system at its source. Robust surveillance systems, early warning mechanisms, and community-level interventions are our strongest defense against future pandemics.
That was Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama.
And now we move to the Central Sahel, where an international forum is underway in Ouagadougou to mitigate illicit financial flows from the AES member states of Mali, Burkina, and Niger. In Burkina Faso alone, losses from the extractive sector in the last 10 years amounted to $5 billion, raising serious concerns among the authorities. These concerns necessitated the meeting of ministers, financial and technical experts from the AES bloc to identify the root causes of fraud as well as effective strategies to combat it. Here is Abdullah Hassan with the details.
A regional international conference is underway in Ouagadougou to examine the dangers of fraud across the country and other Alliance OSIWA states. The forum brings together several technical and financial experts, including customs officials from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The national coordinator for the fight against fraud in Burkina Faso, Dr. Mohamed Kampaori, warns that fraud weakens states.
Fraud in all forms now lies at the intersection of economic and security exchanges. Fraud no longer merely weakens public finances, it also fuels the threats that undermine the stability of the state.
Kampaori says fraud also fuels insecurity across the Sahel region. In Burkina Faso alone, an estimated $5 billion was lost in the last 10 years, particularly in the extractive sector. Dr. Abubakar Nakanabu is the Burkinabe Minister of Finance.
Behind every act of fraud are schools that are not built, roads that deteriorate, and public services that are weakened. It gradually erodes collective trust and, with it, the state's ability to meet the legitimate expectations of its citizens.
The three-day conference is expected to produce recommendations aimed at tackling fraud and reducing its impact across the Sahel region.
That was a report by WDR's Martin Kaba, presented by Abdullah Hassan.
Now, here in Senegal, financial experts and economists have been reacting to the government's ban on foreign trips by state officials. This decision was announced by Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko last Friday. According to Professor Babou Meissa, the frequent travel of government officials, often accompanied by their delegation, cost the state tens of millions of CFA francs each month. Professor Meissa argues that reducing such travel will help streamline public spending and save the state several billion CFA francs annually.
He tells WADR that such savings could contribute to easing the country's burden in servicing its external debt. Take a listen.
We have a country like Côte d'Ivoire with at least 30 to 35 ministers. Here, each one has their own international agenda. You can see that ministers are able to travel frequently. At least, there are 2 to 3 ministerial trips per week. As a civil servant, when I travel and I am given a ticket plus a per diem, it costs at least around 1 million CFA francs for just one person like me, and that without them necessarily covering 2 to 3 days or 4 days in 5-star hotels. So, you can understand that a trip involving a small delegation of 3 to 4 people accompanying a minister can cost at least 30 million. This is because of hotel stays and per diems that can exceed 100,000 francs per day. As a result, these trips are extremely expensive and often not essential. I believe this is a sound and rational approach to public finances because Senegal is currently going through a difficult period. On the other hand, revenues must be increased, and on the other hand, expenditure must be reduced through rationalization. It is, in fact, a form of financial management engineering.
Professor Babou Meissa is a lecturer and researcher at the Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
And now we shift to electoral matters, and former members of Benin's main opposition, the Democrats Party, have now joined the campaign trail of the ruling coalition's presidential candidate. Eric Hondete, a former vice president of the party, and Gui Mitokpe, its former spokesperson, have been seen alongside Romuald Wadani at several campaign rallies across the country. Imo Edet has the rest of the details in this report.
In Benin, former opposition leaders Eric Hondete and Guy Mitokpe are stepping up their public appearances alongside presidential candidate Romuald Wadani just days after joining the ruling majority. The two politicians have dismissed accusations of betrayal and are actively campaigning for Wadani ahead of the April 12th presidential election. In Kumasi, his political stronghold, Hundete hosted the candidate and urged supporters to back him, citing political stability and continuity of reforms as key reasons for his shift. Mitokwe has also joined the campaign trail, calling for strong voter mobilization. Their influence on the ground is already being felt, helping to expand the ruling camp's support base, including among former opposition voters. However, members of the opposition Democrats Party have condemned the move, describing it as political betrayal and warning that it could weaken party unity. With the vote approaching, these high-profile defections could play a decisive role in the outcome of the election. As a reminder, the nationwide campaign by the two presidential candidates contesting the April 12 vote will come to an end on Friday, April 11, 2026. According to the Electoral Commission, about 7 million voters are expected to take part in the election.
That was a report by our Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Souley and voiced by Imo Edet.
Let's talk some more politics, this time in Nigeria, where tensions continue to rise within the political space months before the 2027 general elections. Now, on Monday, the African Democratic Congress, ADC, issued a 72-hour ultimatum to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, over the ongoing leadership dispute within the party. This development adds a new dimension to the crisis, with threats of nationwide protests if the electoral body fails to reverse its decision. WADR's Abuja correspondent Yechenu Sasetu reports.
A 72-hour ultimatum was issued by members of the African Democratic Congress, demanding that INEC restore the leadership led by former Senate President David Mark on its official portal. The group insists that the Commission's decision undermines internal party processes and could deepen the leadership crisis. In reaction, some Nigerians have advised the party to seek legal redress and embrace dialogue to resolve its internal disputes rather than escalate tensions.
Would the ADC be humble enough to do a deep in-searching and fix the problems, the ghosts of leadership takeover that happened when that coalition was formed?
I wouldn't say ADC is a formidable force because just like every other party, I think they are just recycled politicians.
More or less a congregation of aggrieved APC, PDP and Labour Party politicians.
I would advise that they put their whole weight behind one person, probably Peter Obi.
Public affairs analyst Adeni Fatayo says INEC must adhere strictly to the rule of law in handling the matter.
INEC should be an independent and they should obey or follow the rule of law. I don't think they should undermine what they are trying to protect in the first instance because of what has happened and saying that they are not going to take any correspondence from ADC. I don't think is doing good to our democracy.
He has also advised the ADC to put its internal structures in order to resolve the crisis and strengthen the party ahead of future elections.
Of course, ADC too, they need to put their house in order. Regardless, wrangling or crisis, whatever it is, I don't think INEC should meddle on that. Just little interference.
The development underscores ongoing tensions within the ADC as it navigates internal divisions and external pressures. For WADR, Yecheni Sasetu in Abuja.
And now we head to Liberia, and the country has moved to strengthen its national security by tightening control over civilian-held firearms amid growing concerns over illicit weapons. President Joseph Boakai's executive order extending the National Firearms Registration Program was communicated on Monday. The move highlights the government's commitment to reducing violent crime, curbing the spread of small arms, and improving public safety.
Monrovia adds that the measure is in line with international standards. Let's hear the details with our Monrovia correspondent, Abraham Packer.
As of early 2026, authorities in Liberia say about 236 civilians have been officially licensed to hold firearms, marking the first phase of a nationwide registration program. The initiative focuses mainly on shotguns and the summon caliber pistols and comes after the destruction of more than 3,900 illicit weapons over the past year. Supporting the move, the chairman of the Small Arms Commission, Jerome Kokoya, stressed the importance of proper registration.
Many of these firearms are acquired through illegal means, and the country lacks an accurate record of how many such weapons are currently in circulation.
Officials say only two categories of civilian firearms are eligible: hunting rifles and the small caliber pistols for specific security needs. The program also aligns Liberia with international standards and strengthens accountability in weapons control. Security experts have also welcomed the executive order to trace illegal firearms following recent arrests of individuals in neighboring Guinea linked to terrorist networks in the Sahel. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Let's now head to Yaoundé because in Cameroon, a newly adopted bill to create a post of the vice president is raising concerns among politicians and governance experts. Now, results from parliament show that 200 out of 222 lawmakers voted in favor, while 18 voted against and 4 were absent. Under the proposal, the vice president would be appointed by the head of state and would take over in the event of a vacancy at the presidency. Do stay tuned to this edition of Newslink because much later in the bulletin, we'll get reactions and hear from public affairs commentator King Abraham from Yaoundé.
You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and on YouTube and Facebook. Here is a reminder of our top stories. President Mahama calls for stronger health governance and increased investment as One Health Summit opens in France.
Ministers of Alliance of Sahel states meet in Ouagadougou to adopt measures on fraud reduction.
Former opposition leaders joined campaign of ruling coalition's candidate Wadani.
And still ahead in the news, ECOWAS allocates more than $260 million in 5 member states for development projects.
We also have the guest interview and sports news. Stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Thank you for staying with us. Now we head to the Gambia, where the police have disabled comments on their official Facebook page following a surge of public pressure over the unresolved killings of 2 officers in 2023. The fatal shooting occurred at the Sukuta Jabang traffic light while the deceased were on duty. The move comes as citizens continue to demand answers, with calls for justice dominating online discussions. WADR Sang Donald Mendy has reactions in this report.
Usainu Bojang, who had previously been accused in connection with the killings, has now been declared innocent following a court ruling. In the wake of that judgment, citizens have renewed their calls on the government and relevant authorities, pressing for answers on who is now responsible for the deaths. As attention shifts back to the unresolved case, the calls intensified after a recent police social media post wishing citizens a happy Easter.
We will still be asking this question because we can't just lose our brothers like that.
But the people that to answer the question are not willing or are not ready to answer that question. The officers themselves needs to tell us who killed the cops.
Genuine and concerned citizens of the Gambia will continue to ask.
The persistent question reflects broader concern about transparency in how the investigation has been conducted and handled. Human rights activist Madi Jobate says the continued silence from authorities risks undermining public trust.
Every day, police are investigating murder cases around this country. But where this murder case involves police officers themselves, one would have expected that the same effort, the same initiative, the same, seriousness would go in even more in the identification of the criminals.
Meanwhile, effort by WADR to obtain an official response have been unsuccessful. Police spokesperson declined the comment when contacted. As pressure mounts, observers say Restoring public confidence will largely depend on how openly and transparently the matter is addressed in the days ahead. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdona Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
Let's now bring you some good news in Nigeria, the Gambia, Ghana, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire, because the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development has approved major funding to support key infrastructure and development projects across these countries. At its 95th board meeting, the bank announced a package worth $266.7 million or 30 billion CFA francs. Usman Umar has the details.
Speaking at the meeting, the president of the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, George Donko, said the new investments highlight a strong commitment to building a more resilient, inclusive and economically integrated West Africa. A major portion of the funding, $100 million has been allocated to the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway in Nigeria. The project is expected to improve connectivity, ease congestion, and boost regional trade. Further support includes road development in Bauchi State and waste management projects in Lagos aimed at increasing recycling rates, creating 5,000 jobs, and producing 60,000 tons of organic compost annually. For Senegal, 20 billion CFA francs has been approved to strengthen financing for small businesses, improve access to housing, and promote jobs, especially for women and young people. Meanwhile, Ghana will receive $15 million for a tissue manufacturing plant, while Cote d'Ivoire and the Gambia will benefit from funding support to agriculture, private sector growth, and job creation. The bank says these projects are expected to boost infrastructure, support businesses, and drive sustainable economic growth across the region.
Usman Umar reporting.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
And as promised, our guest this evening is King Abiram, a public affairs commentator in Yaoundé.
He joins us with some of the immediate reactions and concerns by citizens across the board on the recent adoption of the bill for the creation of the Vice President's office. Take a listen.
The major concerns specifically from political parties is that the issue of the fact that the vice president has to be appointed by the sitting president hasn't gone down well with the opposition political parties. They were of the opinion that the vice president is a running mate and should be elected by the people. Many are also of the opinion that the government led by President Paul Biya is using this as a quick fix to guarantee his 7-year stay in office, because the argument, like I read in some of the close circles, was that sooner or later we may not even have to have the opportunity to see the sitting president. It will just be the vice president until his mandate ends.
And then there are other arguments that the president's son could be appointed to the vice president position just so that the family retains power and that the ruling party or ruling coalition also stays in power. Which one of these two claims are verifiable?
I have been able to talk to some authorities within the system, and the response is that what is in circulation is fake. Because the bill was adopted on Saturday, and as per the Constitution, the president has 15 days to promulgate that bill into law. And until the law comes out, you can't have an appointment when the law has not been signed by the president. So what we have circulating on social media is largely unverified, is largely fake. We also understand some of these political games, that it's also to test the waters and see what happens, what's the reaction like. So for now, the eyes are watching towards the presidency to see who becomes the first ever vice president as per the constitution of the country. But there's also the clarion call from the two English-speaking sections of the country the Northwest and the Southwest region, that in as much as the position is yet to sit well with a lot of Cameroonians, consideration should also be given to an Anglophone to occupy that position.
Has there been any reaction from civil society organizations in Cameroon regarding what appears to be a planned succession plan for President Paul Biya and the cabal that many say today runs the country?
I think shockingly, the fact that the bill was being introduced, you would have maybe had people maybe protesting peacefully in front of the National Assembly that we don't want this to happen. But again, we've had nothing from the civil society, like even a press statement. I haven't read any yet about concerns in line with the institution of the position and even the election of the said individual that the president will decide as per his discretion. So civil society has been silent so far. I take you a little bit backward. Before the presidential elections, leading up to that, the Ministry of Territorial Administration had worked systematically to clamp the wings of some civil society organizations to justify money that they receive in terms of grants in the implementation of their projects. I see this as some form of a scheme that government had put in place to ensure that the civil society has no voice in terms of what the government is doing. No statement from the civil society. The silence is disturbing, and we're just watching.
That was King Aborem, a public affairs commentator in Yaoundé, Cameroon.
Let's now bring you some sports. Ghana's Black Satellites are preparing for the 2026 Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco, set for April 25 to May 15th. The expanded 16-team tournament offers both tougher competition and bigger opportunity for young talents. This year's stakes are higher as the competition also serves as a qualifier for the FIFA Under-17 World Cup in Qatar, with Africa allocated 10 slots. For the Black Starlets, the goal is clear: return to the top. With a proud history at this level, Ghana will rely on a new generation to rise to the challenge of a longer, more demanding tournament. As preparations intensify, focus will be on the squad selection and tactics, with hopes of turning promise into qualification and possibly another historic run.
Elsewhere, World Athletics plans to introduce a standalone World Marathon Championship from 2030, with Athens considered the inaugural host. The marathon will remain part of the World Championship in 2027 and 2029, before moving to its own inaugural event, with men and women competing in alternate years. From 2031, it will no longer feature in the main championship. President Sebastian Coe says the move will create a global celebration of marathon running. London could host the final edition featuring the marathon if the bid succeeds.
And finally, Patrice Motsepe, president of the Confederation of African Football, is expected in Senegal on Wednesday. During the visit, he will meet with President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and football officials. Talks will focus on the recent Africa Cup of Nations final controversy as CAF moves to address concerns and strengthen ties with Senegalese football authorities. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thanks for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maujo Juf for the technical assistance.
Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Veronica Njai.
And I am Atia Winimbila. Have a wonderful evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Niba County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County. Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone. In Nigeria on Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinion.